the Agile brand.
While entrepreneurs are often lauded with creating new businesses and ideas, it is more often the case that change agents working within organizations, or intrapreneurs, are responsible for innovation and seeing those new ideas through to completion. Welcome to the Innovation Economy Intrapreneurs series. I am your co-host, Adam Chen, an independent change management consultant and current president of AmenityLink, a property technology company. In this series, you will hear stories and insights from leaders within organizations that have had the courage to create new ways to move business forward. To listen to the latest episodes or sign up for the Innovation Economy newsletter, go to innovationeconomy.show or click on your favorite podcast app to make sure you hear the latest episodes. And now, on to the show. Today, my guest is Josh Secrest from Paradox, a leading HR software platform driven by AI. Welcome to the show, Josh. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your company?
Yeah, Adam, thanks for having me. It's always so great to spend time with you, and excited about this podcast. Yeah, so I'm Josh Secrest. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Client Advocacy at Paradox. Paradox is focused on making hiring simple for organizations around the world. We use conversational AI to make sure that people can apply to jobs in minutes and really automate experiences for hiring teams around the world. The reason for the name Paradox is we want people to spend as little time with our software so that they can spend as much time with people as possible. So it's kind of unique that you hear a software company talking about that. I come from an HR, TA background. Got to work at Abercrombie & Fitch and McDonald's prior to joining Paradox. So in my role, obviously beyond marketing within client advocacy, I get to partner a lot with our clients that include McDonald's, General Motors, Nestle, large brands around the world, as well as owner operators and franchises, to really just make sure that their hiring process is as easy, simple, streamlined as possible, and ideate and create with them.
That's great. It's really fascinating, and I'm thrilled to have you and Paradox on the show. I see you guys sitting, right at the intersection of two massive needs in the economy today. You have the talent shortage on one hand, and that's certainly gotten a lot of press of late. And on the other hand, you've got ChatGPT that's all the rage. AI is certainly the buzzword of the day. So, it seems like you guys are really well positioned to make a huge impact in the market. So that's great.
It's really cool. I mean, one of the reasons I joined Paradox was I was really taken by the vision of our CEO, Aaron Matus, who's been able to start a couple different businesses within this HR space. But he was really the first one to see how conversational AI, essentially a chat experience where sort of hiring teams got to deploy essentially what feels like an assistant or like a 24/7 recruiter if you've got, a store, out, and how easy that is. That interface really is the best for candidates because it keeps them from having to log in or use passwords or kind of the waiting game that always happens that ends up having all this candidate drop off. He kind of combined this idea that if you could have one really streamlined process, if you could keep people from having to do all these steps that cause friction, then would you ultimately have a better candidate experience that's more inclusive, that's faster, that's simpler. So he really saw that almost 10 years ago now. So we got a head start. And I think with ChatGPT, I think that's only kind of fueling the fire here for people understanding how simple that interface is, right? It's almost invisible technology, which is exciting. It's like the Apple iPhone, that you can take out of the box and you can start using. I think what's so cool about technology within probably the last 3 years, right, is that it's easier to use. Like, it's more sophisticated, but it's also just easier. And so we've really kind of tried to build an organization on that principle. Making things easy is hard work, but that's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely, you're spot on there, Josh. When the public sees something that's simple, or automated on the front end, it certainly takes much more complexity on the back end to make that work, right? To drive that simple user experience. So I'm very aligned with your thoughts on that. What I want to talk about next is a little bit about the people behind the scenes. That's what we're here to talk about. So question to you, Josh. When I say the word intrapreneur, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. A lot. And I'm going to geek out with you on this, but yeah, I think anybody who approaches their role in an organization is essentially a small business within a larger business. I think anyone who can think about their role as almost coming with like a P&L attached to it, I think is set up for a lot of success and will kind of drive a lot of business for your organization. So that's kind of my frame for it. I'm going to probably overuse the term P&L, but I think, when we think about an entrepreneur, what we hope to see and what we love to see is someone who thinks about, almost every dollar spent as if it was their own dollar, right? As if it was their own business. Is this the right investment? Is this what our customer wants? And is thinking about big picture just as much as about the execution within their particular project or role.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what I'm hearing, to repeat back, is that you ultimately need to think bigger than your role or your immediate impact. You need to think about, how you are impacting the business overall. And at the end of the day, business is all about making money. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about your own entrepreneurial journey. How have you gotten to the point that you're at your career here with Paradox?
Yeah. Well, I think hopefully on my best days, I've been entrepreneurial within organizations. But my journey, I was fortunate to start a small t-shirt company when I was in high school with my brother. I mean, literally selling t-shirts out of like a trash bag at basketball games and out of the trunk of a car. And I mean, these were concert t-shirts or, at sporting events. Got to go to college. I went to Yale University and was able to partner with the university to leverage their logo officially. And so we got to sell t-shirts and sweatshirts at football games. And so it was really neat because I got a taste of true entrepreneurship. And what that meant was seeing all aspects of running a business, the cash I needed to fundraise, the money I invested in that extra screen print graphic on the sleeve. Was it worth it or not? How I was marketing it, what people cared about, who I got wearing the t-shirts first, that mattered. And it was just kind of this pure sense of business, like in the purest way. Anyways, I got to go and then work at Abercrombie & Fitch. My first job there was in their university, kind of the training program. So we got to go out to Columbus, Ohio, worked at their corporate headquarters, and got put on the graphic t-shirt team. And the role that I got to do there, kind of similar, but on a bigger scale to what I was doing, was running what we call almost the domestic graphic t-shirt business. What that means is we could print t-shirts at a screen printer almost down the street or, in a pretty local environment, test some ideas out, print them up in a few different stores, see what worked, and then be able to make a lot more of the ones that did work. So it was kind of this early taste of being able to be entrepreneurial within a larger environment. So maybe just an example of that. I mean, I remember going, out with friends, we'd have a funny joke. I'd call, essentially my voicemail at that time, would leave the message for myself for the next day of like, hey, what if we tested this on a t-shirt? I'd then get with my graphic designers. We'd print something up. We'd actually have them in stores in the next couple of weeks. We could see by the sales whether they'd work or not. And then if they worked, you'd have them kind of nationwide. So it was being able to see in real time an idea get executed, get tested, get real feedback, and then put more dollars behind it. And that was just really exciting for me. And so I loved that piece of it. I ended up then taking my career into HR. I got to be part of kind of the leadership development program within HR. It was supposed to be a year. Got to work for somebody who essentially was a CHRO, but with like a COO mindset. His name's Jim Bierbauer. I mean, it was great to be able to see kind of his frame of he wanted the HR organization to really think like business executives. What are we spending dollars on? How does that impact the business? How does that impact our customer? We were expected to be on our earnings calls. We were expected to ask questions about the business. We were expected to be looking at sales. Just because we were in HR didn't mean that we had to pass there. And he expected us to know the budget really, really well. So that was really foundational. I know we'll kind of dive into some maybe stories on Abercrombie, but then that led me to join McDonald's. And at McDonald's, I was the head of global talent acquisition and talent strategy. That was overseeing our corporate recruiting teams. Got to dabble in some talent management and learn from some experts there, and then really kind of lay out the strategic game plan for how we helped hiring in our talent initiatives within restaurants around the world. We were hiring about 2 million people a year and got to run some really, really cool projects. And so, excited to kind of dive into those. But, within McDonald's, I think the big piece was because of our scale, everyone sort of needs to take on these roles where you're asking a lot of questions, you're getting your arms around fairly complex projects, but those who could kind of see the big picture were able to make a lot of impact. So just really proud of the teams got to work with there, because I think we were able to take some problems and solve them in pretty big ways that had financial impact within the organization. And then finally got to join Paradox. Paradox was one of our key partners at McDonald's. Just love the team there. We'll talk a little bit on sometimes you find partners where it's like the innovation is really sexy and exciting. And I think that was definitely true with Paradox. They solved a real problem for us within McDonald's that we'll talk about. But then the vision of how kind of they saw the world of HR, I think was really amazing. And then the team they were building was incredible. So I'm feeling like I get to be even more entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial kind of in this role now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. To recap some of the key points, because there was certainly a lot that you just shared, I think on one point, you certainly took initiative, with your initial t-shirt business, and that is, a great first step. Additionally, in some of these organizations you've been a part of, you've also been modeled some really positive behavior from other leaders, right? Like this gentleman at Abercrombie that you mentioned, that involved the entire team, and you got to do some experiments, with new designs. And, there was certainly, if I'm reading between the lines, an environment, right, in which you could try things out without the fear of failure. And that seems to me like a very healthy environment for you to kind of come up in. Now that you're a leader at Paradox, I'm curious, how do you think back at your own experiences, and how do you identify, entrepreneurial type talent or other good employees, and how do you nurture these people? So what lessons have you taken from your own experiences, and how do you apply that today?
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit. I'd say maybe I'd start off with I'm a huge fan and proponent of university and early career systems within organizations. We had one of the largest and best. It's still going, and it keeps getting better at Abercrombie. I mean, a couple hundred students per year. At McDonald's, we were able to launch kind of a new university program there to bring in kind of across. Paradox, we have a large program. The reason I kind of name check those is I love hiring from within. I love getting top talent that's super smart, super agile, flexible to be able to play in a lot of different roles. And I think that's actually a key to an organization having more and more entrepreneurs. I think as soon as you get into mid-career hiring, which is great, sometimes you hire for very specific profiles and very specific experiences. And sometimes you find that those profiles are less flexible as you kind of need to move them on within the organization, or maybe are a little bit less entrepreneurial because they're an expert within this one space. I kind of love that idea of, athletes who are smart, learn quickly, well-rounded, just kind of these big brains that are able to play in a lot of different spaces. And I think sometimes that has a nice overlap with kind of this entrepreneurial mindset and stage. So that's maybe part one of this is how do you have just this flow of talent that's coming in, maybe in larger groups that can be flexible for your organizations? Because I think a big part of how you're defining on entrepreneurship, I'm defining it is that you're not just thinking about the silo of the role that you're in. You're thinking about the bigger company. You're processing budget almost as an investment, not just a budget line item, and you're trying to figure out the best ways to spend those dollars. In terms of how I maybe think about or guide teams, I think there are a few different pieces here. One is, how well do our teams know the data and the numbers of the business? What are our goals for the year? I mean, it's something that we try to make sure is really transparent, even to the most junior team member, right? Here are our sales objectives. Here's how we think we're gonna get there. Here's how our team's gonna be able to do it. Let's ask a lot of questions. Let's go into the details on the numbers and the data. Our team has a weekly dashboard that they're all producing. Each one of them has specific numbers to have ownership of. But I think that's a really key piece of like, how does my role impact the overall P&L of the business? We get into that a lot. We set aside a lot of time to be creative, because if you're running your own business, even if you're one person, you need to have the ideas, but you also need to be able to execute them and read if they're working, right? So, we do a fair amount of whiteboarding, a fair amount of sprinting. It is a percentage of our time. It's not all of our time. I think we'd all love to be doing more of these creative sprints, but get the nuggets that are great and then go off and execute. And then the last piece is you're trying to give people budget. Potentially it's not ownership, but budget exposure and transparency very early on within their careers. Again, we try to talk about dollars in our budget less as a budget, as a constraint, and more as we have a pool of investment dollars that we can use to make things better for our clients, that can help drive our business forward, that can have real impact in terms of how we're growing. And so we try to look at it through those lenses. But I think that blend of how are you bringing in agile talent that can be flexible for your organization and maybe think differently in a role, giving budget exposure, really, really focusing on business numbers that go beyond. I'm in the marketing side. We could geek out all day on our marketing numbers, and we do, but we also have to look at our total business numbers, and then giving some time and space for creativity.
I love that. I love the idea of thinking of budgets more as an investment, and then driving that definition to kind of permeate throughout an organization so everyone sees it from the same lens. That's huge and could be potentially transformational.
Yeah,
especially in marketing. And I have a marketing background as well, and so often we're seen simply as cost centers, which really limits the potential upside that you have, for the department, for your own, impact on the business KPIs. So I absolutely love that concept.
The more you think about it as an investment, the more you have smart conversations about relative investments. And I think that's maybe one of the light bulb moments for a lot of people within our teams. We can invest here, and there's going to be we project there's positive ROI. If we spent the $100 here, we think we could potentially return $105 back. But if we spent it over here, we could get $150 back. And I think this is like a key part of this intrapreneurship, because I think sometimes when we talk about silos, which maybe limits us, that's sometimes the part that's missing, is you're not thinking about your dollars as investments, you're thinking about it as constraints. And then when you're spending your dollars, you're just saying like, is that a good investment objectively? Do the odds say that it will be a positive return? Yes or no? It's almost binary. And I think the more we can start to say, well, actually, we could spend those dollars on 100 different things. We've done the research on it to relatively say, this is probably the best return on that investment. It's how our CFOs think about it. I know it's how you think about it. It's how our COOs think about it. Unfortunately, once you go down the organization, you kind of can start to see places where they don't think about it in that relative investment space.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you like what you're hearing, I invite you to check out my other podcast. It's called B2B Agility with Greg Kihlstrom, where we look at the factors that drive success in B2B marketing, with a focus on the people, processes, data, and platforms that make B2B brands stand out and thrive in a competitive marketplace. You can find B2B Agility on this podcast platform or wherever you normally listen. Before we get back to the show, I just wanted to remind you to hit the follow or subscribe button on your app to make sure you get notified when new episodes of this show are available. Now let's get back to the show.
Now, moving on, you hit on something else in your previous response about the idea of idea people versus execution people, right? And I want to dig into that a little bit more. When you're thinking about building teams at Paradox, or perhaps past companies, or how you might even advise current clients, of Paradox, what is the right balance and what is the right way to think about entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, idea people, execution people? Are you looking for people that can wear all of those different hats? Or are you looking at building a team, a high performing team where some people are strong in one area and others in other areas? How do you find the right mix?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to find myself in companies. I think Paradox is very much this way. I think, one of our values is create the future, and so that definitely means people that are coming in can, maybe if they don't see the future, I mean, they're thinking really creatively. Our product people are super creative, but then we mix that with have a high give a damn. And I kind of love that because it's this like, we care a lot about the industry we're in, the practitioners that are focused on talent. We work really hard. We look at data a lot, and you kind of look at that and you'd say, oh, well, there's kind of this blend of like being able to look forward, but then also executing. When I look at Abercrombie, one of the kind of key profiles that we'd look for was, you really need to be this like special blend of creative and analytical within kind of the fashion retail industry, right? Like, a lot of maybe the recruiting and HR work I did in most of my career was with merchandisers and designers. And so they needed to run the business, but they also needed to listen to the customer in terms of what they wanted and what future trends would be. And so how those came together, I think made this really great intrapreneur, in the organization. I think same thing with McDonald's. We found ourselves at a point in time where we had to radically transform how we were hiring around the globe. We were understaffed. We needed to hire 2 million people. We could see that an understaffed restaurant, we left dollars on the table when it was understaffed. We needed to approach things totally differently, and we needed to rebuild our team up. And when we rebuilt the team, we basically said kind of the same thing. We need to bring in people who are agile, can think about things creatively and find new solves that potentially have never even been in the market, but then like love numbers because we want to keep getting better. We need to keep getting better and finding ways to reduce some of the costs on the organization. So it was interesting how those things blended. And I was more willing to take, I wouldn't say risks on talent, but invest in talent who brought kind of that like the smarts, the creativity, the analytical brain to the table versus someone who just had experience within recruiting or HR. I felt like I could get kind of better, bigger, bolder ideas and faster action with that type of.
That's interesting. So what you're describing, and I don't know if any of our listeners are thinking the same thing I'm thinking of, but the word that comes to mind for me is unicorn. You're looking for this person with a very wide breadth, somebody that can flex both the right brain and left brain muscles, that can be creative and analytical and hop between the two potentially, very, kind of on demand. Is it hard to find those people? And how do you identify those people in the first place? Can you tell that off of a resume? Do you unearth some of this insight through conversation in an interview? What is the best way to ultimately find these people?
Yeah, I think it's one I'd probably challenge. I get where you're getting at on like the unicorn side, but it's like, I think this is one where we sometimes maybe limit our job descriptions on like a tertiary detail that is a cutoff point for us. I think, one of the pieces that I think I was well trained on within Abercrombie is like, you do kind of look at that like upside or potential of someone. Every role that you're bringing in, not only can they do this job well, but do we see them being able to advance? Do we see them making our organizations like better? Are they essentially a value add into this role? And I think there are those profiles that exist in every single position. And, I think it's ensuring that your talent philosophies are making sure that that's getting vetted throughout the interview program. Our HR team and recruiting team here, I think does that really well. It is about, you being able to execute in the role you're applying for. I mean, that's certainly important, but what's more important is do you fit the values of our organization? Because ultimately that's going to lead to, your satisfaction and ours, because there's growth there. I'd probably also combine that with like back to the like having an early careers talent program. We're starting to think a little bit differently about how we're doing talent mixes within our organization is really vital to that. You know, if you've got a pipeline of maybe more junior talent that's coming in, that's smart, that's flexible, that's learning quickly, and you can put them in rotations. I think that gets just really exciting for all, like for everyone. I've always seen, you know, managers and leaders get excited by having those profiles come into their team. They're fun to teach. They're fun to hear ideas from. It's amazing to be able to career path for that group. So just kind of starting to see like different ways to play with that. I think we're also starting to see a bit more of this. I won't go on too much of a tangent, but you know, where is your organization dabbling a bit in either the freelance marketplace, or you know, some of this contingent workforce, so that you can just start to test people out a little bit, right? They can run projects for you, X, Y, and Z, and it's just kind of an extra place for you to get a little bit more data on, you know, is this somebody that could be amazing in your organization, and then bring those folks in versus what can sometimes be a rushed hiring process about a very specific role. And that might limit your ability to get this entrepreneurial like profile and make it feel, to your point, like hiring a unicorn.
I like that. I do. You definitely have to play in all of these areas, you know, cast a wide net. You ultimately never know where you're going to find these people, you know. And I absolutely love, you know, the freelance focus. You know, it really de-risks hiring, because we all know making a bad hire is incredibly costly to an organization.
Yeah, and there's more talent in that pool now than it was even 5 years ago. So I think that's a lower risk, higher reward place to start looking.
So moving on, I want to talk tactics a bit. You know, and one of the things that sometimes I ask during an interview, you know, to try to unearth, you know, is this a growth-minded person? You know, do they think about the future? Do they give a damn, right? To use some of your company's lingo. I love asking the question, what do you read? And then just stopping there. You know, it's open-ended. I'm not looking for a specific answer necessarily, just the fact that maybe they're curious, you know, and read in the first place. And then we all, I think, are aware, you know, and we hear it in the press a lot about Google's interview process, you know, and that Google asks these crazy off the wall questions, right? And I think it's the same thing. You know, they're not looking for a direct answer. It's more about how you approach the answer. You know, so I'm curious, you know, if you use any specific questions, you know, in your process, or if you train your teams to do that, to try to unearth, you know, dare I say, some of these softer skills, you know, that might not be as apparent, you know, just reading a resume.
Yeah, I am not going to blow your mind on this, but I mean, I will spend usually 15 to 20 minutes on an interview just drilling into, tell me about your biggest accomplishment and why it was satisfying in as much detail as you can. And then I think the key to that question is I ask them for a second, I ask them for a third, and I make them go layer by layer. And the reason I think that's really important is it's allowing for them to highlight usually, you know, 3 things that they felt like were initiatives or things that they drove. And I'm not really getting a ton of information off of particularly the first question and the first response, but how they start to describe why they thought that project was important, why it was satisfying to them, how they ran the project and thought about its impact to the business. You know, you start to get insights into someone. You ask them it again because the first one was probably a little bit rehearsed, you know, but let's start to see if there are any trends. Again, their initial response on that isn't going to be all that informative, but, you know, as you dig deeper into that, you start to see their philosophies, their approach to project management, what motivates them. You know, truly, I think I could get, by just doing that 3 or 4 times, a lot of what I need to know. Are they using the word I versus we on every single project? Are they admitting some things that they could have done better within that? You know, and I can kind of poke in, there's some humility there. You and I have kind of talked about this, which is you certainly have high performance, low performance. So we'll take that out of it, but you maybe have executors, you have ideators, and an intrapreneur is probably this like beautiful blend of the two. But I think those types of questions on like how they accomplish big projects can sort of highlight where they may be on that continuum.
I like that. And, I think about the way that they answer, especially in questions 2 and 3, it demonstrates to me that if they're able to reflect, right, and being able to even self-assess, I think is a huge skill that I know I look for.
Yeah.
So it's great to try to get to some of that insight. And that's exactly the nature of my question too about reading, is I'm ultimately, trying to navigate to see how resourceful they are, right? In a lot of ways, if you're, faced with a challenge, are you self-sufficient enough to go try to figure it out, or do you kind of wave your hands, so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Just a couple more questions, and I think we can tie this, off in a nice little bow. But let's shift our audience a little bit to, job seekers a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want to, some of the other points that you've made from the hiring manager perspective in the past, maybe we could, kind of bring back. But what is some advice for people that are in the job hunt, that are looking to demonstrate that they have some of this breadth that you're talking about, that they have some of this, ownership mentality and entrepreneurial skills that we've discussed about, on a written piece of paper, you don't get the opportunity to share or show your personality and some of these softer skills. So what is some advice that you can give to people that are applying to jobs that will help them stand out?
Ooh, for those applying to jobs, I think it's a great question. I think it's this, kind of practice your storytelling in your brand. I think coming from someone who has been in a lot of interviews on the other end, like one, we're humans and people, and we want to be engaged and connected with. And so I think that can be used to your advantage in terms of, engaging that interviewer, asking them questions. But I think, kind of practice your brand story of who you are. And I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, it means that you have this intrapreneur kind of like background. So what are the 2 to 3 anecdotes that you can fold in to be able to showcase that? And I think like, this is a good example of it. I think an intrapreneur takes maybe a very specific problem at a company and can spin it to have like the best possible result. Example for McDonald's would be, I was told that we needed new hiring technology in restaurants. Go, assignment, number 2 is go and get new technology restaurants. Ours is clunky. I think most would just go out and buy something that's out in the market. I think what was great about us was we were able to ask the questions for the root problem. For us, it was, why do we need new technology? Well, it's taking our managers a lot of time in that technology. It's clunky. Well, why does that matter? Well, when they're in the technology, it means they're understaffed, which means like things are leaking within the restaurants. We're actually like losing money. It's not where we want them to be, is like back trying to hire. But if they don't hire, we can never actually get there. Oh, that's interesting. What kind of dollars are we potentially losing by being understaffed? Oh, well, we can actually see that there's higher turnover, and we could lose, these aren't real McDonald's numbers, but anywhere from $200 to $1,000 per restaurant. Oh, that's interesting. How many of those restaurants then are understaffed? Oh, about 20%. Oh, that's interesting. It's taking us a long time to be able to staff this. We have a major problem and it's costing us major dollars. Those dollars at a scale of something like McDonald's is, wow, understaffing could be leaving billions of dollars on the table, literally billions of dollars on the table. Okay, so actually maybe the solution here from now, you take it from an entrepreneurial mindset, isn't just like, hey, let's get some technology that's 5% better. It's let's rework and rethink the whole process, because if we can staff our restaurants better, we're gonna have a better customer experience. Our revenues will go up by potentially billions, and we're gonna have managers that have full staff teams, and it's gonna reduce turnover. This seems like a really big thing. This is actually not even just an HR topic anymore. Let's get our CHRO and CDO involved. We've got a $2 billion bogey that can be out here. We were able to loop them all in. We were able to do some things that ended up kind of transforming how hiring worked to get those staffing levels way up. We were hiring in 21 days. We got that down to 3 days. We automated with the help of Paradox, that's part of why I'm here, but we automated almost all of the manager work so that when they were understaffed, they didn't have to worry about staffing. They just kind of got to click and toggle a job on, and candidates just started to show up for interviews. So they went from 21 days to hire to 3 days to hire. They were saving about 5 hours per week per manager. And we were starting to staff restaurants really quickly. So anyways, are you starting to be able to hear that approach or be able to give anecdotes that are like that, where you're able to say, hey, in my last role, I was asked to do this. I did that. But then I was also able to bring some additional ideas to the table that ultimately impacted our customers or impacted our business, or found other ways to use dollars that was beneficial to the organization. I think the more that people hear you as a business leader, a business mind versus just the expertise of your area, I think any hiring manager is going to love that. And it's just really engaging. It's certainly a big piece of how we think about that within Paradox, because it instantly sends light bulbs in our hiring manager, our recruiters' brains, in terms of, wow, this person's not only going to be amazing for this role, they're going to be amazing for Paradox, and wow, are they going to be fun to partner with over the course of their career, because they think about things where they're going to be neat to maybe place over here, maybe they can help over here. Even if we do just bring their mind into this meeting every once in a while, it's going to be a value add.
Wow. I love that mindset and that approach. So there's a couple elements here, and I think I'd like to, replay a couple themes that have come through our conversation today. You've talked a little bit about transparency and communications, and I think that's, been permeated a lot of your own experience. You've talked about data-driven culture, right? And exposing that data to everyone in the organization so that we're all on the same page. What else is there? If you're a business leader today and you want to drive a more intrapreneurial culture, some of that is creating the environment in which that can thrive. Data is a part of that. Communications is a part of that. What else is there? Or said another way, what advice could you give a business leader that wants to, get on this train and wants to drive a more, entrepreneurial culture within their organization?
Yeah, maybe a few things, and this is different by cultures. Sort of where are you within the continuum certainly matters here. I think if you are a CEO or a CHRO that's coming into an organization that needs change, that needs innovation, that needs to find ways to save costs or drive the next big idea, ultimately, what is the forum for people, regardless of department, to make suggestions? Do you have a forum for that? Is that forum in a place that can feel pretty safe and confidential, right? I even though I don't sit in the marketing department, I feel comfortable being able to submit X idea. Even though I don't sit on the product team, I feel comfortable submitting Y idea. Hey, I was listening to customer feedback. I was observing this, and I want to be able to bubble that up. So sort of what are those, back to your point on communication, do you have a culture that's really listening to some of those different ideas? I think a second piece is, how do you, in a high ROI way, allow teams to quickly assemble on ideas and put those ideas either into motion or at least into a pitch to senior level leadership? That can look like a lot of different things, but if you're not doing this today, go in and dig into the concept of a hackathon with your IT department, because it's just glorious, right? Teams, huddle up for 48 hours. They not only conceptualize an idea, but they build prototypes, and they, essentially have these amazing pitches, within 48 hours. And I think it just shows the power, oftentimes junior level talent that's doing that. And they come up with amazing things. And I think a lot of organizations haven't quite figured out how to bottle some of that up kind of throughout their organization. And I think, either giving some space for that or tapping some different people to go on some, like, let's call them sprints or hacks, I think could be really, really powerful too. I just sometimes think that organizations, we can get into like our org charts and roles and responsibilities a lot, and maybe over index in that way. And I think even if you were to say, hey, let's free up 5% or 10% for some of this ideation or quick sprint team assembly or these hacks to potentially disrupt, I think you're going to get more ideas. The second piece is sometimes you're in an organization that has plenty of ideas. You have so many ideas. I think within an organization like that, then it's more kind of back to what you and I were talking about on how are you building proficiency in the organization around budget and investment and some of your data and analytics. Because I think that's then going to this place of like, do you have everyone to your most junior level talent starting to think through like, hey, how I'm investing this dollar is important, and I think is going to have the biggest relative impact. And I think there are several different approaches that you can do to kind of like build up that competency. But I think that's really helpful to add now a lens to all these creative ideas to say like, that was a good one, clever. Now run it through the business model. Would you invest your own dollars in this? If so, why? Okay, you would invest your dollars in it because you're thinking you're going to get a 20% return. But this idea over here, you can understand that it seems likely that we could get a 200% return. So we're going to put the dollars over here. And just starting to be able to get people thinking a little bit more on the business, how the business makes money, understanding that budget isn't unlimited, no matter what business or company you're at. It's a limited resource that is an investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what I'm hearing is it's really empowering everyone in your organization to make a suggestion, make an impact. But it's not just that. It's also then, to go and execute on it, and I think ultimately make their own trade-off decisions. So
Yep.
That's very empowering, and you have to educate them in order to make that educated trade-off decision. So, it sounds like Paradox is doing an incredible job doing that. And it seems like a wonderful place to work.
Well, it's neat from that. I think it particularly is highlighted in our product team where, one, they're like creative geniuses and they know, cutting edge on everything that's going on in AI. But I think our CEO is great about this. Our president is great about this. Who's our chief product officer, which is like, are you proposing something that's cool or something that's going to be really valuable to a client? And make sure you're making distinguishing between those two, because in this space we're in, there is a lot cool stuff, and there's some stuff where, and I can't help it sometimes, just like you see some of the stuff that's coming out, and your first reaction is like, that's so cool. But their point, right, is that it's like we're not just trying to create bells and whistles. Like, what problem does this solve for our customers and our clients? Where do we feel like that sits in the market? Is that a differentiator for us? Is it really relevant? And those types of questions are coming to people 3 months out of school. And I love that. It's like, because on one end of it, it's allowing for a good amount of freedom to ideate and create. But it's like, you're also going to be held to these standards of, we're not just making cool, pretty things. Like we're making things that solve problems, identify the problem that we're solving.
Amazing insights, Josh. I really enjoyed today's conversation. And with that, I just want to, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh my gosh. Well, always just like love that you're creating space for these types of conversations in the marketplace. I think you've kind of described this so well of, we talk and celebrate a lot about entrepreneurs, which rightfully should be celebrated. But there is just, there's so many amazing entrepreneurs in the companies that we work for. And I think a lot of us who've said kind of throughout our careers, at some point I'm going to start my own company. At some point I'm going to start my own company. I think organizations is the right ones with the right cultures and the right leaders are setting up an environment where those people are starting to excel and actually really have have amazing benefits for the organization. And it's really satisfying, even if your mindset was, oh, at someday I wanted to start my own thing. So it's really healthy to be having these conversations. I'm glad you're celebrating that community, and can't wait to listen to more of your podcasts.
Thanks again for listening to the Innovation Economy podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes at www.innovationeconomy.show or on your podcast platform of choice. The Innovation Economy podcast was created by the Agile brand. Be sure to check out the Agile brand guide series of books, the Agile brand podcast, and other resources for marketing, CX, and other enterprise leaders to manage change and transformation in their organizations. The Innovation Economy is proudly produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, let's keep innovating.
The Agile brand.